Imagine a city pressed against its own walls, the air thick with smoke and the iron taste of fear. Cannonballs gouge the plaster, timbers smolder in the streets, and people push coils of rope and sacks of earth into position as if every pair of hands could stitch together a seam in the city's skin. That city was Vienna in the summer of 1683. Its gates watched by thousands of tents and standards that blurred into one vast, foreign sea. For weeks, the Ottoman host had encircled the capital of the Habsburgs, and for weeks, the sound that reached the defenders was not only the boom of guns, but the hush of dread. What if the city fell, and with it, a door into the heart of Central Europe? If this moment sounds like a hinge in history, that is because it was. The fate of Central Europe, for a breath and then another, hung by a thread. Yet, in that precarious hour, the threads that would pull Vienna back from the edge involved more than one hand. The rescue that followed was the product of reluctant diplomacy, fragile alliances, dogged defense, and one king whose decision, bold but calculated, would be remembered in paintings and songs, and sometimes reduced to legend. John III, Sobieski, was not alone on the ridge where the salvation would come, but his leadership shaped the moment. If you enjoy deep historical stories, subscribe for the full account. From the Balkans to the Danube, the Ottoman host rolled like a storm. The army that gathered outside Vienna in 1683 was the culmination of a long campaign led by Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, a commander who sought a decisive blow. Contemporary sources and later estimates differ about exact numbers. Historians typically suggest the Ottoman army may have numbered in the low hundreds of thousands by some counts, though conservative estimates place it closer to 100,000. What is clear is that it was a formidable, diverse force. Janissaries, the elite infantry loyal to the Sultan; Sipahi, the feudal cavalry who fought with lance and saber; and a host of auxiliaries, Tatars, irregular light horsemen, and engineers with skill in sapping and siegecraft. Their tents fanned across the plains, their batteries wheeled into place and began to talk in cannon thunder. The Ottomans did not come to the walls of Vienna to negotiate. Their strategy combined heavy artillery to batter the bastions and miners who tunneled beneath them, sapping as it was called, with sappers whispering through dark galleries to plant explosives or collapse foundations. Siege warfare in the 17th century was as much a contest of endurance as of arms. It was the long arithmetic of water and grain and patience. Kara Mustafa's men set up batteries to pound the outer works, while engineers dug toward the curtain walls. From the hilltops around Vienna, the defenders watched the earth themselves being rearranged into danger. Inside the city, the rhythm was different, shorter, more urgent. Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg commanded the garrison with a terse stubbornness that became the city's spine. The Habsburg garrison was small, a patchwork of imperial troops, city militia, and desperate volunteers. Emperor Leopold I had left the capital to seek safety and support elsewhere. His flight was a political necessity, but it left a symbolic gap that Starhemberg and the city's inhabitants had to fill. Bread was rationed. Cellars with frescoed saints became clinics and mortuaries. Disease threaded through the cramped quarters. Women and children hauled sandbags to the walls. Cannons were recharged by citizens who had never fired one before. Starhemberg organized sorties, small, violent raids that struck at Ottoman trenches to buy time and to disrupt sappers. Each successful sortie was a small triumph. Each failure made the hunger and cold grow heavier. As news of Vienna's plight swept across Europe, the siege became not simply a military problem, but a political and cultural alarm. Pope Innocent XV framed the crisis in grand terms, appealing to what he called the defense of Christendom, and began to broker aid and moral support. His pleas were not merely spiritual rhetoric. They were diplomatic pressure aimed at persuading reluctant princes to set aside rivalry and act in common cause. The Holy Roman Empire was a tangle of courts, some fearful, some indifferent, some openly hostile to the idea of aiding the Habsburg Emperor. Louis XIV of France watched with opportunistic caution. Smaller states hedged their bets. Yet the Pope's call and the clear danger to the balance of power created a window for a coalition. The Holy League, a fragile alignment of interests that nonetheless managed to pull forces together. Across the Polish plain, John III Sobieski watched with his own set of calculations. A seasoned commander and a wary statesman, Sobieski was no mere romantic hero. He had tasted the costs of war on Polish soil. He also knew that an Ottoman victory at Vienna would ripple toward his own eastern borders and encourage further incursions. That argument, saving Vienna to save Poland, was part patriotism and part cold realpolitik. Domestic politics in Poland were fractious. The king risked his position by taking the field. Leading an army abroad could drain resources, alienate magnates, and expose the Commonwealth's vulnerabilities. Yet in late summer, he gathered his forces. Estimates again vary, but Sobieski marched with a cavalry force that many contemporary accounts and later scholarship place around 20,000 riders. The crown jewel among them, the Polish winged hussars, armored lancers famed for their discipline and the sweeping spectacle of their wings. The march itself was arduous. Sobieski's men crossed rivers, navigated marshes and bad roads, and moved as fast as an army of horse, baggage wagons, and artillery could manage. Logistics in the 17th century were unforgiving. Supplies had to be coaxed out of reluctant allies or seized along the way. Old rivalries made the coalition's progress tense. Bavarian and imperial commanders grumbled about precedence. Language barriers impeded detailed coordination. And yet necessity welded a temporary unity. Banners of states that had once been adversaries hung awkwardly side by side in the camp. When Sobieski approached the Austrian frontier, the full picture sharpened. Vienna, sealed within battered walls, the Ottoman camp to the south, and the ridge of Kahlenberg looming to the northwest, an axis of heights that would soon decide the battle. On the Kahlenberg ridge, commanders talked in maps and in the geometry of slopes. Terrain matters in battle as much as those who hold the field. The ridge provided both a mask and a vantage point. From there, massed cavalry could be held in concealment, and artillery could see the Ottoman lines. In this terrain, Sobieski displayed his blend of energy and restraint. He did not rush his cavalry down the slope at the first sign of smoke. Instead, he positioned them as a decisive reserve, a shock force to be released when the moment came. Allied infantry, Imperial, Bavarian, and others, would engage the Janissaries in protracted, bloody fighting to fix them. The idea was to let enemy formations tire and fray against stubborn resistance, and then to smash the center with a cavalry charge that had both momentum and surprise. It was bold in concept, but careful in execution. The day of battle opened with probing attacks, artillery exchanges, and small-scale assaults that tried to unbalance the Ottoman lines. Contemporary sources reported scenes of brutal, close-quarter fighting around the low hills and redoubts that dotted the plain. The Ottomans, for their part, defended with their characteristic tenacity, Janissary formations holding steady, Sipahi cavalry countercharging where they could, and reserves poised behind field fortifications. As the hours passed, the contest took on the languor of attrition, the muffled, grinding business of bodies, powder, and mud. Allied infantry pressed forward, and the Janissaries, though elite, began to show cracks where sustained pressure met the skills of experienced Habsburg pikemen and musketeers. Then the trumpets changed the shape of the world. As the afternoon leaned toward evening, Sobieski gave the order that all the pieces were waiting for. From the woods and folds of the ridge, the Polish hussars formed. Imagine not only the sight, their lances rising like a forest of spears and their backs ornamented with wooden frames bearing feathers, but the acoustic change. the drumbeat of thousands of hooves, and the clang of harness that had been held in tense silence. The charge that followed is one of those rare military moments where timing and temperament collided perfectly. The hussars, accompanied by other Allied cavalry, descended with a rhythm of impact. A cavalry charge is a study in physics translated into human will. Momentum carries a shock. Armor and lance focus that shock into a narrow point of contact. The Polish hussars' training, cohesion, and psychological effect were central. Contemporary observers spoke of how their wings startled horses and men alike. Later painters froze the moment in art so audiences could feel its drama. But myth can blur nuance. The charge did not single-handedly vanquish the Ottoman army as if a spell had broken. It struck into a battlefield already prepared. Janissary units had been engaged and pressured on their flanks by Allied infantry. Ottoman field formations were stretched. Morale, buffeted by cannon and musketry, and the sight of reinforcements on the ridge, faltered. When cavalry impact met worn formations, cracks became ruptures. Lances and sabers shred cohesion. Panic ripples and becomes contagious. Kara Mustafa Pasha's reserves, where they existed in sufficient number, could not reconstitute the line. Reports from the field speak of tents abandoned, artillery captured, and routes forming into chaotic retreats. Kara Mustafa himself fled the scene as command unraveled, a choice that would mark his fate in Ottoman circles. The Ottoman camp, which had loomed so imposing in the morning, turned into a labyrinth of confusion by nightfall. The rout that followed was terrible in its practical results. War does not end cleanly with a charge. Pursuit produces slaughter and pillage. Exhausted troops exact vengeance or succumb to the temptations of spoils. Allied discipline varied. Some units chased with restraint, seizing artillery and supplies. Others gave in to the disorder that always attends victory. Casualties on both sides were heavy. Contemporary accounts vary on precise numbers. Historians typically caution against definitive tallies, but it is clear that losses were significant among Ottoman combatants and among the Allies who had borne the brunt of prolonged engagement. The city of Vienna, by contrast, breathed a collective sigh and then set to the grim business of counting what had been lost and what must be rebuilt. In the immediate aftermath, the relief of Vienna had practical military results. Artillery abandoned by the Ottomans became trophies and tools for the victors. The retreating Ottoman forces crossed rivers and trudged back toward the Balkans. Their momentum halted. In diplomatic terms, the battle marked a shift in the balance of power. The Ottoman expansion into Central Europe had been blunted, and the aura of invincibility that sometimes surrounds empires was dented. This did not, of course, mean the Ottomans vanished overnight. They remained a major power, and conflict would continue in the decades to come. But the siege's failure was a turning point that consolidated a new strategic status quo in Europe. The political fallout was complicated. Emperor Leopold the Faun could claim deliverance, yet the coalition that saved his capital also underscored his dependence on allies. Pope Innocent V's role in framing the crisis as the defense of Christendom gave him diplomatic credit, even as different states pursued their own agendas. For John III Sobieski, the victory was both a high watermark and a bittersweet triumph. His leadership on the Ridge earned him pan-European fame. Paintings, poems, and the adoration of grateful Austrians and other contemporaries made him a celebrated figure. Yet his name did not translate into lasting political gains for Poland. Domestic politics, shifting alliances, and the chronic vulnerabilities of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth limited the long-term leverage that battlefield glory might have promised. Sobieski's reputation reveals why the phrase "unsung hero" fits uneasily with the reality. To those who study the battle closely, he is not unsung in the sense of obscure. His figure dominates many eyewitness accounts and later commemorations. But in broader narratives of European history, the role of a coalition, the stubborn defense of Starhemberg, and the garrison and the contributions of Imperial and Bavarian forces are often compressed into the single image of a winged hussar leading a charge. The danger of such compression is that it simplifies cooperation into a one-actor tale. Sobieski's charge, decisive, visible and dramatic, was the culmination of a chain of actions. Diplomatic pressure that formed a coalition, the endurance of Vienna's defenders that bought time, and the coordination of Allied commanders on the field that allowed an assault to be feasible. A single charge need not be the sole cause to be decisive. It can be the final stroke that follows many earlier labors. Memory treats events oddly. In the years and centuries after 1683, Vienna rebuilt. Churches and palaces rose again. Artifacts and paintings memorialized the heroism of certain figures. Songs and toasts named Sobieski, the savior of Vienna. The Ottomans memorialized their own losses and continued to define themselves by other struggles and reforms. For Central Europe, the battle became a reference point, a moment when expansion was arrested and where alliances, however fragile, had real effect. It shaped military thinking as well, reinforcing the power of shock cavalry when combined with disciplined infantry tactics, a lesson that would be studied by commanders who followed. Still, any account that dwells on glory without grief is incomplete. The human cost must be acknowledged. Soldiers on both sides died far from their homes, often in brutal ways. Townspeople suffered loss and the trauma of siege. Families were shattered. Contemporary letters and diaries record the faces of the wounded, the small acts of bravery, farmers who risked their lives to carry water, surgeons who worked hour after hour under the flicker of lantern light. Victory cannot erase such pain. It simply changes the political arithmetic of what comes next. That sober reflection is necessary because it keeps history anchored in consequence, not myth. To understand the battle's tactical core a little more concretely, consider three elements: terrain, timing, and reserve. Terrain turned the Polish cavalry's descent into a weapon rather than a gamble. The slope of Kahlenberg allowed a charge to build speed and target the Ottoman camp directly. Timing mattered because the Allied infantry had to sufficiently engage and unsettle the Janissaries before cavalry smashed in. If the charge had come too early, it might have been blunted by fresh Ottoman reserves. The reserve, Sobieski's preserved cavalry, was the structural choice, to hold something back until it could be multiplied by the enemy's fatigue. These are not poetic categories, but practical ones, the bread and mortar of 17th century warfare. Kara Mustafa Pasha's plan had logic too. To conquer Vienna would have been to secure a strategic bastion on the Danube and to project Ottoman influence into the Habsburg heartland. His decision to commit to a siege reflected both ambition and calculations about alliances and timing. But sieges are delicate operations. They require secure lines of supply, engineering skill, and patience. When a relief army appears, the calculus shifts. That is when the risk of encirclement becomes a risk of being cut apart in detail. In this case, the combination of resolute defense, diplomatic pressure that produced a relief force, and the decisive exploitation of a battlefield window resulted in an Ottoman retreat that had consequences beyond the immediate. Those consequences unfolded in the years after the battle. Diplomatic realignments followed. The Holy League was more formally constituted, and the Habsburgs regained momentum in their conflicts with the Ottomans. The victory at Vienna set off a sequence of campaigns that gradually rolled back Ottoman control in parts of Europe over the following decades. Economic and social repercussions rippled outward as well. Refugee flows, disrupted trade routes, and the shifting priorities of states recalibrating their military investments. Artists and writers fed the memory of 1683 into the cultural fabric of Europe. Monuments and histories shaped subsequent generations' sense of what had been at stake. Yet historical nuance resists tidy morale. The victory did not cure all the ills in Central Europe. the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth faced internal divisions that would, in time, erode its power. The Habsburg monarchy consolidated certain gains, but also faced limits to its authority across a patchwork of territories. The Ottoman world, though bruised, adapted and continued to assert influence in other theaters. The battle was a pivot, not a total reset. How then should we place John III Sobieski in the story? He stands at the intersection of personal ability and circumstantial necessity. He was an accomplished military leader whose decision to march was risky and whose timing on the ridge was crucial. He combined audacity with restraint, audacious in the sense of leading a foreign intervention with heavy political stakes, restrained in his patience to withhold the decisive weapon until it could operate with maximum effect. Such leadership is compelling because it is neither reckless heroism nor cold calculation. It is judgment under pressure. A photograph of a single charge cannot capture the days and weeks of diplomacy, endurance, and preparation that make such a moment possible. At the same time, labeling Sobieski unsung is a deliberate choice to underscore a comparative lack of attention in some narratives, not to erase the applause he did receive in his lifetime. Paintings celebrated him, diplomats thanked him. But over centuries, as histories prioritize different theaters and numbers, the full mosaic of coalition action has been sometimes flattened. Remembering Sobieski requires us to remember others. Starhemberg and his garrison who bought the hours, Imperial and Bavarian commanders who fought their part, the engineers and cannon crews who created the conditions for success, the ordinary citizens who kept a city alive in extremity. The victory is not a single-story triumph. It is a composite achievement with a distinct consequential act of leadership, Sobieski's charge, at its center. The legacy of 1683 therefore asks of us a balanced remembrance. It asks that we admire leadership without romanticizing the raw brutality of combat. It asks that we credit coalition efforts without denying the decisive weight of singular acts. It asks that we understand immediate consequences, artillery and prisoners, retreat and rebuilding, while recognizing longer arcs, shifts in diplomacy, the gradual ebb of Ottoman expansion in Central Europe, and the cultural memory that persists in monuments and national stories. In practical terms, Vienna rose again. Streets were rebuilt, fortifications repaired and modernized, and new art commemorated what had happened. Politically, alliances hardened, and the Habsburgs leveraged the victory into further campaigns. For Sobieski personally, the battle was both crown and burden. His reputation soared, yet Poland's internal troubles meant he could not fully translate battlefield renown into a durable geopolitical advantage for the Commonwealth. History, in a sense, treated him with ambivalent recognition. Praised for one of the most dramatic cavalry charges in early modern warfare, yet part of a broader sequence of events whose long-term outcomes were shaped by forces beyond any single leader. If we return to the title that frames this account, The Unsung Hero, how the Polish king turned the tide against the Ottoman Empire, we arrive at a careful verdict. John III. Sobieski did help turn the tide. His resolve to march, his command choices on Kahlenberg, and the charge of the Polish hussars were decisive ingredients in the outcome of September 1683. Yet the tide did not turn by miracle or by a lone act of valor. It turned because of a chain of human decisions. The defenders of Vienna who refused to surrender, the diplomatic pressure that coaxed allies into a shaky coalition, the discipline of infantry who held the line, and the king who, because he chose to risk his resources and lead his men, provided the pivotal force that completed the Allied effort. To call Sobieski an unsung hero is to insist on restoring nuance to how we remember the past, recognizing his centrality without erasing the contributions of others. History often narrows its focus to images that fit a single frame: the winged hussar charging, the grand vizier fleeing, the cannonball lodged in a gate. Those images are powerful and true in part, but they are fragments of a wider sequence. The siege and relief of Vienna in 1683 were moments when strategy, endurance, diplomacy, and leadership intertwined. They remind us that turning points rarely arise from pure force alone. They emerge from timing, coordination, and the willingness of people to act together in perilous moments. If you want more sources and extended reading on Vienna, 1683, check the description and subscribe for detailed bibliographies and maps that unpack the campaign step by step.